VA Health and Benefits, official mobile app for VA Health and Benefits. VA's official mobile app is a smarter, more convenient way for veterans to manage and carry their VA health and benefits information. One veteran notes, "I went into my local hardware store and logged into my VA mobile app. A quick glance at my phone showed them I was a veteran, and I was able to get the veteran discount without any paperwork. It was easy and convenient." Download the app via the Apple Store at https://apple.co/3 lowercase b lowercase k 9 uppercase o lowercase l, or download the app via the Google Play Store at https://bit.ly/3 uppercase q 5 lowercase q 9 uppercase l 5.
Hello and welcome again to Oscar Mike Radio. I'm your host. My name is Travis. Oscar Mike Radio is part of the Hubazoo network. You can find out more on hubazoo.com. I want to thank my sponsors, Joyce Asack of Asack Real Estate, Army National Guard veteran Mark Holmes of Reapers Detailing and Power Washing, and my supporters, Semper Savage Salad Dressing, Bottom Gun Coffee, and Cason Shaving Company. Last shout out, I promise. A big shout out to the Veterans Brotherhood Motorcycle Club. Let me get this right. There we go. Who gave me this hoodie and had a wonderful breakfast this last weekend to raise money for veterans nonprofits in the South Shore area of Massachusetts. JK, Lunch Pail, Rhino, all you guys, Connor, thank you very much. I'm just having a lot of fun with Oscar Mike Radio. This show will probably drop in January of 2023. That's just how mission and flight we are. And it's just getting better. I get reached out to on Instagram. You can find me on Instagram from Spencer Emch, and he had this book. And the book is called Time of Flight. And it's about helicopters, which I love. Army aviation, which even as a Marine, I'm going to tell you, Spencer, I love. And, the Apache AH-64 longbow, which I'm like, yeah, we used to practice shooting you all down. Like, yes, and yes. So I am pleased to introduce Spencer Emch, Army veteran, Army aviation, Army pilot, warrant officer to Oscar Mike Radio. Sir, welcome to Oscar Mike Radio.
Hey, thanks, brother. It's nice being on here.
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you for sending me the book. It allowed me to dig into it. I went full nerd. I had my notes out because, I told another Army aviation, pilot, he flew Hueys, that, the book that I judge aviation books against is Chicken Hawk by Robert Mason, and that's what I do.
Yeah.
And I started digging in your book and I'm like, okay, this is different, but in a good way.
Well, it's a completely different time period
Right.
too. I mean, I can't even it's amazing. Every conflict that happens, the next generation that comes along, things are more technologically advanced, all these things. It's like, you think back to putting yourself in those guys' shoes and you're like, man, I have no idea how anybody ever survived that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So for our guests, watchers, and listeners, and me, tell us a little bit about yourself going up to joining the Army, please.
Sure. I'll give you as short a story as
That's
I can.
fine.
I grew up down the road from you. I grew up on the shoreline of Connecticut. You guys are in SoMass, right?
Yep.
So I grew up there. My dad was an airline pilot for FedEx. My mom was a Spanish teacher, middle school Spanish teacher. And I wanted to do skiing and stuff like that. I did X Games stuff on my skis when I was a kid, and And I ended up going to university, and I went to the University of Oregon to move as far away as possible. Didn't want to be there. I mean, I don't know. I just didn't get into it. I was having too much fun experiencing life, and I dropped out of college. Did the next best thing to make parents proud, as I joined a band and went on tour.
Yes.
So,
Now, what's your musical taste like, Spencer?
at that time, alternative rock, like 90s alternative rock, late 90s, early 2000s. And we went on tour, did some stuff, but I decided that if I want to do music, I should do it like legitimately. So I found a music school in Hollywood, California, moved there, went to Musicians Institute for a couple years, and became a professional musician, which don't make much money. And the Army said, hey, we have musicians, by the way, we'll pay back $65,000 of your $85,000 student loans and have pay and benefits and all that stuff. And it sounded like a good deal. But my dad was Navy. Both my grandparents were in the military. You know, my uncle was in the Navy for a long time too. So I'm no stranger to military, and it sounded like a best way of doing things.
Last music question, like, what's your preferred instrument?
I'm professionally trained as a drummer, so I play drum set, and then I play bass guitar, and I can fool people into thinking I play piano. I just know enough to read
Stu Ham, Billy Sheehan,
Oh yeah, man. Stu Ham's like
right? Oh, we're on.
he played bass for Satriani for a while.
Right.
Yeah,
We're tracking, sir. We are tracking.
yeah,
Awesome,
yeah.
awesome.
So yeah, I actually joined the Army as a musician. I was enlisted, and I played drums for the 101st Airborne Division rock band for 4 years. Did a year in Afghanistan playing ACDC, and Skinner, and then when we were in garrison, spending every weekend in Nashville. So
Now, how does a drummer from the Army go to pilot one of the most advanced, assault helicopters ever made? That's only
yeah.
it can only happen in America,
in,
Spence.
in the military, even like talk to civilian people about a transition like that, they'd be like, yeah, you're smoking something. No, it's while I was at Campbell, so my dad was a Navy pilot. My little brother was an Air Force pilot. He actually just got hired by Delta. He's flying out of New York City now. And so I had pictures of my wall of my family and both of them in their airplanes, flight suits and stuff. And I was teaching drums to this kid, and his dad was cool. Like I was, late 20s, and his dad was like, I don't know, 30, like 40 something, like 41 maybe. And his dad was a Black Hawk pilot for 160th. And he was cool. Like he would come over and hang out, and he saw the pictures. He's like, dude, like you're from a family of pilots. Like, do you ever want to fly? And I was like, well, yeah, of course. He's like, all right, you're putting in a packet. So he helped me drop the packet, and with a senior W-4 from 160th letter of recommendation, I got picked up and made it through flight school. Was the honor grad, and then when I had to choose my helicopter, he was pushing for me to go Blackhawks, and I just thought, well, it'd be cool to be a Black Hawk pilot. But and it was before they got rid of the Kiowa. The Kiowas are cool too, but I just figured, okay, look, no matter what I fly, they're going to put me somewhere where people want to kill me and shoot me down. So the question is, when I'm in that position, do I want to have an 18-year-old on a 240, in a little window to help me out, or do I want to have a bunch of rockets, missiles, and exploding 30 millimeter rounds to shoot back with? And I opted for the most amount of firepower to shoot back. Yeah.
So nice. So you made it through high school, your first auto rotation, all the stuff that you do to become an Army aviator. And the book, and ladies and gentlemen, the book is Time of Flight, through Tactical 16 Publishing. Yep. More on that later, and by Spencer Emch. And so you kind of bypass that in the book, and you start off with being in Kuwait.
Yeah.
And I actually thought it was kind of cool you did it that way. I mean, you could have really gone over the nuts and bolts of the Apache, what it did, how it's different than other helicopters, and the platform it is, which, again, we spent a lot of time in our MOS learning how to shoot you all down. So there were certain things we had to know about the Apache versus, say, like the Cobra. But you kind of bypassed all that, and you went into, you're in Kuwait. And it was very different than Robert Mason's Chicken Hawk experience. And this is why I'm like, okay, this is cool. We're not hearing about getting off the ship and doing all this. You're essentially sitting there, it seems like, waiting for something to happen.
Yeah, for sure.
And I guess just from a story standpoint, what's it like flying in the desert like that? Because it's very different than in the jungle or deciduous, trees and everything, where you can be seen very easily and you can see targets very easily. What was that like, especially in the heat?
Well, you know what the crazy thing is like literally our battalion's from Fort Drum, so we're on the border of Canada. We spend all our time flying in 6 months of winter, like in the mountains, in the trees, in the forests, like in the, near Whiteface Mountain and, and all that. So us going to Kuwait and flying in the desert, like I mean, honestly, there are some things that easily translate. Like in the wintertime, we practice snow landings, whiteout landings. So, we don't get spatially disoriented and crash a helicopter. It's very similar to a dust landing. In the desert, when you land, all the dust comes up. So you got to get on the ground before you lose sight of where you are and everything to be safe. And so some things translate, but the other things that don't, I mean, like flying's flying. But atmospheric conditions, it's like really, really hot. So, we're used to colder weather, even in the summertime, cooler weather where we can take off 3 bags of gas and and load it up and not have to worry too much about what our power settings are. But in the summertime, especially in the heat of the Kuwaiti desert and Iraq, after that, it's like, you're trading. Okay, you're trading gas for munitions. Like, okay, how much do we take less munitions so we can have more time on station, or do we take less gas, have less time on station, but we're loaded down?
Yeah.
And at the beginning, it didn't really matter because we were in Kuwait. It wasn't a war zone. That's like a PCS move. It's completely different. It's not, they're happy to have us there, and we're just there in case, just in case, and what's interesting is you mentioned why I started in the desert and on the deployment in the desert in Kuwait. And I was literally, because when I thought about writing the book, that's what I was doing. I was in Kuwait in the desert, walking to drop off my laundry at the laundry facility with the crappy brown sand, and I was thinking about the fact that both my grandparents were in both my grandpas were in World War II. The one was a radio man on a destroyer in the Pacific, and the other one was in 101st in an artillery battalion. He was an artillery officer in the Battle of the Bulge and all that. And I never knew that grandfather. He was my dad's dad. He died when my dad was 13. And my grandpa died when I was at the University of Oregon. So I wasn't interested enough in military. I wasn't old enough or mature enough to ask him about his experiences and what he went through and everything. And so I thought, well, I don't have any kids, but I want kids someday. And if I ever have them, like, it'd be nice to be able to have something to give them so they could read about my experiences. So maybe we'll see how this deployment goes, and I'll write it down. I'll write down what happens and see if nothing happens. Okay, well then Grandpa was bored as crap in Kuwait, because at that point that's what was going on. But that's where I decided to write.
One of the things that I got out of the book, maybe all your readers get this, but I certainly, when I read it through again for the second time, I'm like, okay, I don't think I'm making this up in my mind, is, and I think it was important for you to talk about this, is every unit, we have the Army, we have the Marine Corps, and then we have the, battalions, regiments, platoons, squadrons. Every unit has their own attitude, flavor, right? They're all different. Absolutely. And it seemed like that you were, for whatever reason, it just didn't quite click for you. You weren't really enjoying the Army lifestyle, or even you liked flying. That was clear, but you weren't fulfilled at that time when the first part of the book. Did I get that right?
You absolutely got it right. And the crazy thing is you can take, like, we were talking about before this, is like you can take a a unit that's great, that everybody hangs out and they spend a lot of time together, and everything's good. And then you change the commander and you change one of the lieutenants, and all of a sudden everybody in that unit's at each other's throat, depending on how toxic the leadership environment is. That was the case at that point. And also we had something else going for us too, which was, you can try really, really hard for a long time, but if nobody notices you, or and anyone, if there's no recognition given, at a certain point, those individuals are going to say, why am I doing this anymore? Like, for instance, we had something going on in our unit where pilot in command of the aircraft is a title that's given. It's basically a responsibility that's given. It's not based on rank. It's not based on time and service, but it's basically based on proving yourself and how hard you try at the unit and everything. And our battalion just was not making pilots in command. We had a lot of pilots in command, the older guys. And so all of us junior pilots, which this book's more or less about, it's more about people than it is the technical. Like you said, it's more about people and situations and describing what people go through on deployment than anything. But those titles are awarded for, a reward for trying really hard at work, and very much so at that time in our unit, we were not making pilot in command. And what was going on was, you have your job, which is your advertised job. And most people, they spend maybe 10% of their time doing their advertised job and 90% of their time doing other stuff, right? Like all of us in the military know that.
Yeah.
So I think at one point I had 7 additional duties or 8 additional duties, officer in charge of this, officer in charge of that, whatever, and I was working really hard at the 3 I had. And I noticed the guy next to me was doing a very poor job. And so they would take it away from him, and then they would give it to me. And then that guy would leave at 3 in the afternoon. And then I would leave at, 5 or 6. And it's like, what's the point of me continuing to try hard if all I'm doing is gaining more work for myself, fixing everyone else's problems, and we're not getting recognized for these things. So by the time we were in Kuwait there, I was very much jaded on the job. I would say that very, very much so, and the transformation happens later in the book, which, I'll let you get into, but.
Well,
yeah.
it was really interesting how that affected not only you, but other pilots, because there was no apparent pathway to progression, even though you could demonstrate technical and strategic expertise with the aircraft.
Sure.
And it definitely comes out. And some people don't, civilians, a lot of them think that with all this leadership focus in the military, that there's no way that talent and resources are misallocated, and it's kind of hard to pull back that screen sometimes, but that's the truth.
The U.S. government tried to do an audit of the Army a number of years ago, and after 2 years of trying to audit 1 year worth of stuff, they just gave up, and we never heard about it again.
Right. I mean, it's a big machine. It's a big machine, but it speaks to, because some people don't understand that you go to a unit and, why doesn't that, in my view, why doesn't that first sergeant like you? Why doesn't that staff NCO like you? And come to find out, at least for us enlisted guys, nothing you did wrong.
No,
you're a 49ers fan. He's a Cowboys fan. So what that colors is it's literally that petty. Right.
Yeah.
And it was very, real to see that on the officer level, especially when you're in charge of the kind of machine that you're in charge of.
Well, the thing about aviation that's a little bit strange and much different than the rest of the military areas are the fact that, our unit's like 30 some odd people, right? Half of them are enlisted. The other half are officers, right? Like you have probably 12 or so warrants and 3 O grades, maybe 15 warrants, depending on the aviation company. But so when that happens, when you have a unit that has most of their officers are CW2s, Chief Warrant Officer 2s, right? Well, guess what we become? We become the privates of the officer world. Nobody cares that we're officers because the unit is mostly officers. So we get you know, it's like it's kind of like anything. It's like the more of them there are, the less in value there are. You know, so aviation is very much like that. You know, I actually had a CW2 come up to me on that deployment, and he was like, "Man, I was talking to your S." He was the camp commander or the camp whatever mayor, and he came up to me, he's like, "Man, I can't believe like I tried to talk to your S3 and tell you guys that your unit has additional duties that need to be done, and he just kicked me out of there like as nothing. It's like I'm an officer, you know." And I told him, I was like, "Dude, how long do you have in grade as a CW2?" I was like, "I have like 3 years on you in grade, and I get treated like you got to understand, dude. Nobody cares if you're a warrant in a you know in a place that is that heavily with saturated with warrant officers."
But it was really like, I like the way you did it, where you're in uh, Alpha Company, right?
Yeah.
And then you go to Bravo Company and kind of punch north. You literally leave. Did I get that right? It's Alpha then Bravo.
Yeah, yeah, for
Cool,
sure.
cool, 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 cool.
A guy with the same qualifications as me stepped in a pothole when he's running, broke his foot, had to go to Germany, and so they pulled me up. Yep,
And
and then my world flipped 180 degrees. I had a crew
what
I got along with, and everything was kumbaya again.
what was that like? Because again, I mean, I really like the way you kind of say, when I'm at this point in my life, personally and professionally, where I'm like really questioning, WTF, what am I doing here? And
Yeah,
then this happens literally on a PT run,
yeah.
and you're being told, hey, you're going, get ready to go. And it's like you're playing guitar with your, crewmates, you're doing this
My
stuff, you
commander,
guys are
even. Yeah,
going to get pizza.
yeah. It is completely ice cream. Yeah,
Right, completely different. And you're getting the train you want on the aircraft. So you've kind of gone through this bad part. What was it like then being in this different company?
well, I think it was a multitude of things all together at the same time because like when we moved up to Iraq and I was still in Alpha Company, we're sitting QRF. You know, we're waiting for something to happen and not getting used because we'd already kicked ISIS out of Baghdad. You know, so we're at Taji and there's nothing going on, so we're not getting called. So we're sitting 12 hours a day. Everyone's playing video games. I'm not a video guy. I'm a nerd, so I read or whatever. And like and so everyone's already feeling like they're worthless. You know, everyone's already feeling like, why am I here? What's going on? And so besides just switching company and going to a company like I said in the book, like the guys in Alpha Company, most of them got along great, and they're all kind of like the hunter fisherman types, and like that's not me at all. I grew up like surfing and music and all this stuff, like and don't get me wrong, like we were amicable and stuff, but I just didn't find like real friendship, and all of a sudden I go up to Bravo Company and there's a rack of guitars in the pilot's office, and I'm like, oh my god, like who plays guitars? And we just had a lot more in common. So besides that, we were also getting used. So now I'm moving to a different place. I have more in common with the people I'm there with, but also at the same time, oh, by the way, we get to do our jobs instead of just sitting there waiting around for something to happen. So, you get the multitude of levels of fulfillment at the same time. I mean, it makes your experience night and day different.
So to go back to Chicken Hawk real quick, one of the things that's diametrically opposed from the two books and the way uh, rotary aviation was used in Vietnam versus what they did with you all is a lot of the times Robert Mason's out there and he's having to make decisions on his own
Yeah.
and live with those decisions on his own right then and there. I didn't realize how managed you all were before you even, kick the starter button on,
Sure.
to having your camera feeds reviewed, to having to call in every action and get approval before you take that shot. And
Yeah.
it interested me because it almost seems like a management exercise versus a combat exercise.
Sure.
It's not enough to be, proficient with this machine and be able to do its job with it. You have to, go through the bureaucratic layers to do anything.
Yeah.
Did that Was that ever like normal for you? Was there ever a time where you're like, you know what, I don't need to call back home to get approval to do this. I got the shot right now.
Oh well, there's some fundamental things that happen in
Okay.
the book that allowed that to kind of switch, because at the beginning, that's how it was like when we were able to kind of fly out and do stuff. We were very restricted in how far we were allowed to advance until I think one night the A-10s broke. And then they're like, okay, I guess we'll put the Apaches in and we'll see. And we did such a good job that every night after that, there were 2 Apaches, 18 hours a day over Missoula, continuously, right? So, but before that, there's a couple key differences between the situations. And you can actually go from early days after 9/11 in Afghanistan and then Iraq and all this stuff. There's big differences between that and 2016 when we were with taking out ISIS and all that stuff. And the differences are huge, right? At the beginning of the wars, Apaches went out and killed stuff. That's what they did, right? And then the wars kind of shifted from Al-Qaeda and Taliban to winning hearts and minds and all this stuff, and being extremely worried about collateral damage and everything. And that's when the commanders started getting scared about who's shooting what and get permission first. And then every gun tape was reviewed and get ready to go to Leavenworth if you accidentally, if your missile landed too far to the right or something, like all that kind of stuff happened between 2003 and 2009, right? And then it kind of shifted. We were winding down everything. We still had troops in Afghanistan and everything, but the difference between Iraq 2016 and those early days and even later days in Afghanistan was 2016. We were not there. We were invited, I should say. We were invited by the Iraqis to help take out ISIS. So we were guests. So because we were not an occupying force, that's what I was looking for. And there weren't many of us. There was much fewer aircraft. If something were to happen, the American public would lose their taste for us being there at all. And it would be pull out, we don't want any part of this, whatever. So we were kept on an extremely tight leash at the beginning until we proved how effective we could be. And once we proved how effective we could be, once those A-10s broke that one night or whatever, it was, okay, no, you guys need to be in the fight 24/7. That was it. And then after that, the leash came off. I mean, it didn't just get loose. It came off. I mean, we were up there slinging missiles every night, all the time. I mean, we were literally in charge of reviewing our own gun tape, not just to make sure that we're keeping ourselves in check. But at that point, it was no, okay, you guys are good. We don't have to worry about you guys. Go out and do your thing, And a lot of people don't understand too that the difference with the Apache versus some of the other aircraft is we're not necessarily working with the JTAC. I mean, we were then because it was Peshmerga and Iraqi army with U.S. Special Forces and coalition special forces embedded with them. So we were always talking to a familiar Five Eyes voice, but we're our own release authority most of the time. If we see something bad, we don't have to ask permission to engage. Air Force aircraft are not like that. The A-10s can get a rating where they can go through training to become a release authority in their own aircraft. But 99% of the time, they're working with somebody on the ground that's guiding everything they do. We have freedom of maneuver. We have freedom of pretty much what we need to do to get the job done, including releasing munitions off the aircraft. The pilot command is responsible for that.
It was just a different way of looking at it. One thing before we go on our next topic that I kind of picked up on is the level of coordination. It's 2 Apaches out there, and one is spotting for the other one, and then the other one fires. All that radio traffic that you write about in the book to do one shot at a target was just astounding. Sure. It's. I think people get the idea that you guys are like the Firebirds movie. To go back.
God, don't bring up that movie.
Don't bring that up. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's God.
That's bad.
That's the worst movie ever.
but people think you're just going in there and there's a interstate full of traffic and you guys just mow it down. I mean, it was kind of crazy. I'm like, okay, you've got Apaches flying figure 8 circles over a target. One is spotting it with a laser, and the other one is firing at it, and they're doing this in tandem. Just for the helo nerd in me, how much training does that take to make it natural?
You know what we're really good at doing? We're really good at making stuff up in the U.S. military, and like
No.
going out there with not a lot to go on and finding a way to make it happen. You know, I mean, there's a famous quote by a German officer in World War II. He says the problem with fighting against the U.S. Army is war is chaos, and the U.S. Army practices chaos on a daily basis. I think the other one's a Russian officer in the Cold War, and he says the problem with planning the fight against the Americans is the Americans don't feel the need to follow their own doctrine, let alone read it. You know, so but no, I mean we practice. So we practice all the time doing remote engagements where one Apache is using the laser, the other Apache sets their missile code to it and shoots, right. We did that a lot with the UAVs, the drones in Iraq. But the challenge was for us was Mosul's a massive city, so you have the urban canyon concept, right? So you have these north and south running streets and east and west running streets, and like what happens if you got a guy and you're trying to keep an eye on him and he's running east to west and then he turns north to south. Well, he disappears. So we ended up having to do split ops, somebody up north or somebody up south and somebody on the east side to be able to make sure we could cover from whatever angle, you know. And so that's kind of more or less our coordination in that kind of thing was trying that out, because it's until then for all of us it was just theoretical, you know, and then working with the UAV guys, you know, and that was also up until then kind of more or less theoretical. We kind of had a lot of firsts on that deployment, really, with some of these engagement techniques and everything, and it just was trial and error. I mean, there'd be times we'd come on station and be like, "Hey, we just showed up," and they're like, "Yeah, put your missile code on this. We got something." You know, we'd be like, "Okay," and you guys are cleared in. You know, after giving the required information back, and it's like, dude, like. Okay, what are we even looking at, you know? And then yeah, and we'd get the information on the inbound and we'd see it and we'd be like, okay, yeah, we see what you're seeing. Okay, great. Yeah, I mean it took yeah, maybe like a week or so just to get used to it, but it wasn't like anything. It's you just do enough and uh and you get pretty good at it.
Well, again, ladies and gentlemen, the book is Time of Flight by Spencer Emch, excuse me, with Tactical 16 being the publisher. And we're talking with Spencer Emch about his time in the Army in the AH-64 Apache. Real quick, for people who don't know much about that aircraft, does a
Sure.
pilot sit in front or back?
So both stations have flight controls. You can fly from either the front or the back. You can also shoot from either station, from the front or the back. The difference is the main targeting system, the TADS, Target Acquisition Designation System. The really high quality camera is accessed from the front seat with the Xbox handles and the extra screen, and so it's better for targeting from the front. So most of the time, the guy in the back is flying and coordinating with the sister aircraft, you know, and the guys in the front seat are running the battle. They're talking to the ground guys and doing the targeting and the shooting. But
Which role did you enjoy more?
I think it depended on the day, honestly. Some days I didn't want to deal with looking through a camera and constantly switching through the settings to try and break out, you know, FLIR imagery and everything, and it's just more fun to fly sometimes. And but at the same time, like sometimes it's like, okay, you know, I don't want to have to deal with thinking about all that goes into flying. I'd rather, you know, play the video game in the front seat. But it's not like we're trained any different. You get trained in both seats. Both people are qualified in the job, and you know, once you're FMC, fully mission capable in both seats, and you've had the training at the unit, then it becomes like, okay, we're on the flight schedule tomorrow. Do you want front seat or back seat? You know, and that's it. Yeah.
Going back to the book, one of the things sections you wrote about that I thought was, like, in my view, one of the best parts of the book, but also one of the most conflicting parts of the book that I thought that, you know, us guys on the ground and especially civilians needed to see was the vampire section.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And you know, I'm not going to spoil it for you all. Buy the
No.
book, read the book, but it's where you all and the Apaches had to make a call, and that call resulted in very real consequences. And I'm not going to spoil it for you. You've got to buy the book. Okay, buy the book, buy and read the book.
Yeah.
So you know, but
Well, it's not just us; it's pilots in general. You know, I mean, like the medevac crew. You know, they could have made a choice. They were very, you know, I don't want to spoil it either, not really, but basically it comes down to decision making, and sometimes it depends on what you want to do. Sometimes it depends on what your command team tells you to. And the only thing I will say about that part to really get into it is um, when, at least at that point in our deployment, we had not regularly gone out beyond the wire yet. We had not regularly gone out and shot or been part of the action. So the command team, that's part of when it was very restrictive, and they were very scared of losing an aircraft and that being all over the news back home. That was the last thing they wanted. That was the ultimate worst thing that could happen. So we had a very tight leash on us, and mistakes were made, and you know, things can happen, and you can decide to disobey orders, but you have to have a good reason for it. But at the end of the day, it's whether or not you can live with your conscience and everything. And I wish we could have done more. But from our perspective, all we could do is support the medevac crew and the medevac pilots and make sure they were in a safe position, and they were in a safe position. And I know those pilots will think about that situation for the rest of their lives, you know. And do you want me to go into what vampire means?
Yeah, go into what vampire means, but don't spoil it.
No, I won't. Okay, so vampire is a call that basically, when you have a wounded person who's coming back to the LZ, and the surgical team is prepped to save their life, when the vampire call comes across the air back to the command group, it basically means tell the surgeons to go from life-saving procedures and getting the operating room ready for that to post-mortem procedures. So it means that the person in medevac died on the way back to base. Yeah.
Well, again, for a lot of reasons, not only do I think that was a very relevant story to tell, it was, for many reasons, my favorite part of the book, because it showed a side of the decisions that had to be made. To your point, decision making, that, you know, many of us, once we get out of the military or we're in the military, never have to make.
Right.
It's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback, and you should have done that. You should not have done that. Right. It's another matter to be there in the minute and realize you got to make a choice. And there's no real training for that, right, Spencer? I mean, you got to.
Well, one of the points I tried to convey throughout the book, I think, was to let people know, like, look, this book is about the people who went through this. You know, like I honestly didn't write it to get published. I wrote it for my future kids. You know, I mean, like I told you before, it's like 700 pages, and we had to cut it down to about 350 to make it readable. But we're all of us who wear uniforms are like everybody else. We have all the same emotions. We go through all the things. You have all different kinds of people. A lot of family members think that they're a class clown back home, you know, that's always joking, never serious. That when they put on that uniform, they become this stoic military person. And it's like, dude, like I've used GoPros on too many JRTC exercises and like given the footage back to the family. They're like, man, that guy is just as crazy, you know, at work as he is at home. And it's like, yeah, we're all normal people. We all go through the same things, but the situations we get put in as military service members, especially on deployments, they're stressful situations. And it's not that the stress is any different. I mean, yeah, it's different, but like we're normal people. It's just we're experiencing a much higher level of emotion on all fronts, you know, at any given time than a person back home per se. So like I think I even make the point in the book at the beginning. I don't really remember exactly how I worded it, but it's just like, hey, look, like read through this. This is what we experienced, and how would you put yourself in, you know, if you were put in that situation? Think about your thought process. Like, what would your thought process be? Like you said, you can armchair quarterback this all you want, but you know, you don't know until you get put in these positions. And just like you make mistakes in real life at home, you make mistakes in real life in combat, you know, and sometimes it's your fault, sometimes it's other people's fault. And you know, and all I can say about that vampire situation is like, man, I'm really glad that I was not flying that medevac bird, you know, being told what they were told, and you know, and because I think that would have been probably I don't know, I don't even know how I would deal with
Right.
that thought for the rest of my life. You know what I mean? Like
Can you
that's
say you would have done the same thing? Can you say you would have made
I
different
would have
choice?
loved to say I would have made a different decision, you
Yeah.
know, but honestly, at that time, I wasn't pilot in command of an aircraft or.
Well, I like how you left it with the reader, like, what do you think? And in the back of my mind, it's like, okay, what would I have done? And here's what happens if I had done that. Here's what happens if I don't do that. And I think this is why it's one of the reasons why it's my favorite is you kind of let the reader make the choice in their mind as they're experiencing this with us. So I
Yeah.
really like that. Conversely, on another side is you have the longest hellfire section, which I'm like, talk about decisions.
Yeah,
One of
man.
your crazy crewmates decides, does
Yeah,
the math and
man.
does this,
Oh my God. Yeah.
like,
Oh,
I'm
wow.
going to try this thing. Let's just try it.
You know, it's really interesting, and it's because we get told what our limits are, you know, and it's like anything in life. You don't really know what the limits are until you try and push the boundaries of those limits.
Well, he did.
You did, yeah. And it comes down to a point. It's like, okay, you're in a place where you can make a difference. Do you go off what the book says, or do you go off of, you know, what your experience is so far? And I mean, to his point, like we were shooting beyond our published max ranges, you know, effective max ranges, and we understood why the ranges are what they were, what the technical perspective, why those were the max ranges, and we learned, okay, yeah, we can shoot a little farther, but the question is like, but then the question becomes, well, how far can we shoot and be effective, you know? And some people were in a really bad situation, and Ben took a, you know, he took a leap of faith in his equipment and his training, and oh man, I mean, like he proved that our machine was far more capable than we had been told, you know, and that was amazing. I mean, really, really amazing.
Speaking of machine escaping right now, just popped in my mind. It's on Amazon Prime, and
Mhm.
it's about a bunch of Apaches that go into Iraq and get shot to. I mean, these things get beat up, Spencer, and
Yeah,
they're.
yeah, sure.
I'll send it to you afterwards. It's just
Yeah,
a
please.
thought.
Yeah, it'd be cool.
They're showing images of these things shot up, and they showed letters these guys wrote to Boeing about how resilient this aircraft was. I mean, was there
I
ever a time where you're like, you know what, I got a good bird underneath of me, and I'm really proud that I've got this?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, just the design itself, it's amazing what that aircraft is capable of. I mean, we have the ability to absorb a lot of small arms rounds, you know, because we're flying low at close range and everything. We're scared of the big guns just like everybody else, you know, but with small arms and some HMGs, we're pretty comfortable getting low, and that's why we're always low and in the fight as close as it can be to the ground troops. This deployment was a little different because we're flying mostly up at altitude, because we needed the altitude for the extended ranges of our missiles. But the we're constantly briefed with what the bird is capable of, and everybody who's an OG at the unit who's been around a while as a W4 or whatever, you know, they'll show us pictures from previous deployments where they're like blades of bullet holes all you know, all the way through them, like throughout, and the undercarriage of the bird just completely shot to crap, and you know, and we have some systems on board that are that are awesome, that are, it's all public knowledge, but like we pump nitrogen into the gas tank so that way there's no oxygen to have fumes, so when we receive bullets it doesn't cause a spark, and things like that. We have fuel tanks that are self-sealing and everything in the case of shrapnel. And so yeah, it's an amazing aircraft. It really is. There's it's really funny because we always feel like we're like last on the list for upgrades and everything. And it sucks because we look at the Air Force guys and the F-35 and their super high-tech helmet with like heads-up displays, and we're wearing like a tube TV on the side of our face, and the problem is we keep making it work and are still the deadliest bird on the lowest, as closest to the ground as possible. So yeah, it's funny.
Well, one of my top 5 other sections of the book that I really liked how you did this is you describe in very easy to understand layman's terms why helicopters are needed. The difference between a helicopter being able to do what it does versus the A-10, the F-35. You all can get closer to the fight. You can do pinpoint precision strikes, pinpoint, close air support for a sustained period of time, and, keep the troops alive, but also, affect damage on the enemy. And that's overlooked sometimes with, some of the things that are coming out now. So before we go into the next part is 2 follow-up questions. Do you think rotary wing aviation is still needed in this day and age with all the advances made?
Absolutely, without a doubt. Yeah. Because like you have to imagine that the UAVs flying up at 20,000 feet, right? They can see a lot and they have good camera systems. They really do. However, they're at 20,000 feet. So unless they're doing, 10 nautical mile, radius, circles around what's going on, and can really break out the subject to the background and see, like, there's a lot of times where we're so low and so close that because we're so low and so close, even though we're using FLIR, it's a much higher resolution. I wouldn't say it's a higher resolution image. It's not, but we have more fidelity because as the target moves against the background, because we're lower, it's moving faster against the background. We're able to PID, positively identify weapons a lot quicker. Kind of nefarious intent. Yeah, we just have a different perspective, and we're there in the moment. Where the UAV guys, they're flying around, they're sitting in a shack back safe behind the lines and everything. They're like, well, we can see it, we can kind of not see it. It's a little different when you're there, and you can pick up on things in a way that they can't. And we also, everything we do, which I think is a little different that most people don't realize, is everything we do is friendly centric. So everything we do is about the friendlies. Hey, where are the good guys? Okay, here are the good guys. Let's talk to them. Hey guys, where are you getting shot at from? Oh, well, we're here. They're shooting at us from over there. Okay, let's look over there. We see them. Okay, we'll help you out. A lot of people think that we get sent out to go like blow up radar sites or whatever. It's like, no, the Air Force handles all the offensive aviation stuff with the long range cruise missiles and jets and everything. Everything we do is in support of the ground troops, which is why Army has most of the helicopters. We are there to provide service for them, specifically for the infantry and everybody on the ground. So that's why the Army still has a primary role with rotary wing.
All right, last like helicopter, book, and then we're going to go into.
Yeah.
So the Army has the Chinook, the twin rotor, heavy lift helicopter. What do you think about that system? It's been around forever versus the Marine.
I wanted to be a Chinook pilot, man.
It's an awesome aircraft.
It is.
Versus the Marine Corps' Osprey. I mean, which one do you want to fly?
Oh, Spencer? Man, I would much rather fly the Chinook. Absolutely. There have been a litany of problems over the years with Osprey when it came out, and it's a really cool concept. And then they're like, okay, we're going to have airplane pilots fly it, and then airplane pilots have no idea how things work at a hover, and they crashed a bunch of them. And, and then it's like, okay, maybe we should use helicopter pilots. And it's a really, really, really cool concept. However, it's not like they're nowhere near as maneuverable as we are on approach. It takes them much longer to get from forward flight mode to hover mode and all those kinds of things. And they're a big bird, even though the 50 or the excuse me the Chinook is a big bird too. I mean, it's able to land in much tighter and much kind of crazier areas than the Osprey is, just because its size.
Well,
But
I'm
no,
like,
I like the Chinook better. Yeah.
it can't, and I got shot down. I'm like, it can't auto rotate. And, I read reports where when in water, you can't really rescue people with it because of the downforce of the rotor blades will push rescue swimmers underneath the water. So you almost have to, there's a lot of problems with it. And
That's interesting.
And when I was in the Marine Corps, I remember the one that crashed at Luke Air Force Base when we heard all about that. So it's an interesting, cool concept, but it also kind of, the Chinook it may not be the sexiest to a lot of people and not the flashiest, but when you understand what it does and why it does what it does, it's a pretty amazing platform.
Oh, especially when it can sink its back end into the water and take up a rib, from the special guys. Like all like the stuff that bird is capable of is insane. I love that bird. I would have flown it, but again, it was just a question of if someone shooting at me, do I want an 18-year-old on a door gun or do I want missiles?
Take the missiles.
Yeah,
so
yeah, sure.
You got a little love story weave through this. I like how you did that. Kept me wondering. And then I'm like, did he get the girl? Did you get the girl, Spencer?
Well, that's the crazy part is like, the funny thing is like Bree's awesome. She's super cool. Like one of the coolest people I've met. And, but like that happens, that stuff happens on deployment. We're all people. It's not like all of a sudden we go to war and we turn off, our emotions and our thoughts and how we feel about other people. But like, especially like you mentioned how I felt at the beginning of the book. Dude, like I was I didn't have friends. I felt like an outcast in my unit. Like and I found this person who was interested in similar things and was happy to talk to me. And she was kind of an outcast in her unit too. But we became really good friends and we spent quite a lot of time together. In many ways, she saved me on that deployment. Like I was actually really depressed, thinking about it after the fact. But yeah, it's amazing how just one person who cares about you in your life can flip that switch from being, man, what am I doing here? This is terrible. I can't believe, like, if anything happens, I'm going to die because these people don't have any idea what they're doing, or, to okay, well, I can take care of myself and I can take care of the things that I know keep me sane. And like it's just amazing how one person being close to can do that. And yeah, we've hung out before and everything. She just recently got married, but it wasn't about that. It's just in the moment, she's who I needed, and I was who she needed, and we had a close relationship for that time. And it's amazing because it's like that saved us both in that time period. Really,
it was really cool. You didn't go too mushy on it, but you
Yeah.
let the reader kind of make up their own mind. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure.
So you talk about coming back home and some of the challenges around that, and that there's a perception out there that officers and warrant officers have it easy when they get out of the military, and I found out over time that that's not necessarily the case. Some officers have a tough time too, just like us enlisted. You get out, and now you're doing all this other kind of stuff. I'm like, okay, I thought for sure you'd be, working at some airport doing, chartered private helicopter flights for people, but you're not.
No,
You're not even close, Spencer.
No, I live on the other side of the world, man.
Right. I mean, it's 11 o'clock here. Was it almost 8 o'clock where you are?
It's about to be 7. Yeah, about 7.
So
Yeah.
what are you doing, ladies and gentlemen? He's in Romania.
Talk about, I live in Bucharest, Romania. Yeah, you hit on something very clear, and that's getting out of the military. Number one, it doesn't matter who you are. If you don't have a plan getting out of the military, it's going to go badly for you, right? The command sergeant major of my what we call SFL TAP, basically the course that you go through to help you transition to civilian life before you get out. He told me something, because we were able to do it a year out, basically, from when we get out. he said something to our class, which was, if your unit thinks you're doing a great job in the year before you get out, you're setting yourself up for failure. When you get out, you have not taken enough time for yourself to figure out your life and your plans and everything. If your unit thinks, you've fallen off the horse and, and you don't care about them anymore, you're probably doing a good job taking care of yourself, getting ready to transition. and it's true, but like I got out, and a lot of people who aren't in aviation don't know, but there's a global shortage of airline pilots. Something like 80,000 airline pilots in the next 10 years. The world will be short. My dad is an airline pilot. I saw that lifestyle. So I was like, hey, for the first time in history, the airlines were hiring military helicopter pilots and paying for their transition to airplanes. So I was like, yeah, get me on board that for sure. You mean I'm actually going to get paid just to be a pilot and I get 20 days off a month? That sounds awesome, and travel for free. So I went through the transition. I got out. I went through the transition program, learned how to fly airplanes, and then COVID hit. And they said, sorry, we're not hiring anybody because we're shutting down all the flights. So I went and I lived with my mom for a year, dude. Like, Army officer, I lived with my mom for a year, just because I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I was like, do I want to do this? Do I want to do that? My wife is Romanian. She works for NATO. And so she was like, hey, like, I'm friends with a lot of Romanian Air Force pilots that got out and flew for like Blue Air, Ryanair, whatever, like, European airlines, low cost airlines. She's like, maybe I can get you a job. Okay, cool. Like, let's see. And so I got hooked up with an interview, and they're like, yep, okay, cool. Like, yeah, let's hire you. That's cool. Come move to Romania. And she's from Romania, so like her family's out here, and I've been a bunch of times. So like, to me, dude, like walking around Transylvania is like walking around the woods of Massachusetts or Connecticut. Like, it's on the same latitude, same trees, feels like home, It's just take all of New England and get rid of 90% of the people. It's awesome. It's amazing. Yeah. And mountains that match that are on par with like the Rocky Mountains, basically the Carpathian Mountains. So it's awesome. And I was like, yeah, let's go to Romania. I'm down for an adventure. After anyone who's been overseas will know that, like, after 2.5 years of your life in Iraq or Afghanistan, pretty much anywhere else in the world seems pretty peachy. So, yeah, let's do it. So we move over here, and then after we move over here, a couple months later, they're like, COVID, we're not hiring anybody. Yeah. And through a conversation at a bar, like, I grew up skiing and snowboarding at a pretty high level, and I heard somebody say the word heliski. It's like, oh, heliski. You have heliskiing in Romania? And I was like, Inglesa? Like, hey, do you speak English? He's like, oh, of course I do. And it turned out to be the lead guide for a heliski company. And I was interested as a client. Hey, how much does it cost? What do I have to do? Like, who do I contact? And 2 beers later, he's like, what do you do? I was like, oh, I fly. I'm a pilot. He's like, helicopters? Like, yeah. He's like, we need a helicopter pilot. So I spent all last winter with Heliski Romania. And I spent a lot of time on the ground on skis too, unofficial photographer, unofficial guide, just kind of extra eyes on the mountain. And the rest of the year, I kind of fly private airplanes and helicopters for people. I got my EASA licenses, FAA converted over to European. And in order to get paid as an expat, I had to start an equivalent of an LLC to get paid business to business. The tax advantages are amazing. And I had a company, so I'm like, oh, maybe I should do something with the company. And so now my company does work in action sports here in Romania. So I spend all my time flying and playing in the snow, on the Black Sea, surfing, things like that. Yeah.
So you're getting paid to do what you do for free.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, man.
Now, heliskiing is where they take the skiers up in the helicopter and they jump out of the helicopter and ski downhill.
Off at the top of the mountain. Yeah. Yeah. And some pretty serious backcountry training. That's what you would believe by watching movies. But in all reality, if you're an intermediate level skier or snowboarder, most heliski companies around the world have terrain. That's their primary audience. Primary clients are intermediate to advanced level skiers or snowboarders that are comfortable in it's just like any slope you'd have on a ski resort, except it's just not groomed. It's powder snow, and it's completely to yourself and your friends, which is amazing. Yeah.
Just a quick helicopter question. So the air density and a high altitude is less than at sea level, right? So is there any challenges flying at a
Absolutely.
higher altitude? Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. That's what limits us in our ceiling with helicopters. They're obviously not as efficient as airplanes. Airplanes want to fly. The forward thrust is what makes them fly. Helicopters requiring beating the sky into submission to climb. But no, for heliski, it's amazing what modern technology does. We fly Airbus H-125, or the Eurocopter AS-350 B3E. And that is the only helicopter that's ever landed on the summit of Everest, 29,000 some odd feet, and stayed there for about 3 minutes, took off again, and flew down. But that bird has actually made it up to, like, I think the record is 43,000, something like that. So
Wow.
yeah, as high as the airliners fly, basically. Yeah.
So you're doing all this, and you're now in Romania. Oh yeah, which makes you like you're rare. You're an international guest officially, which is pretty
Oh yeah,
cool.
that's cool, man. Right on.
And then you decide to write the book. How did you get hooked up with Tactical 16 Publishing? Because it was a really interesting story here, and I like what they do. How did that happen?
So, for those who don't know, Tactical 16 Publishing is a alternative to self-publishing, right? You can self-publish your own manuscript and put it on Amazon. And by the way, Amazon takes like 60% of your profits, so heads up. That's not really well advertised before going into it. But on my last deployment, the deployment I actually met my wife on before we got entangled, we kept in touch for a couple of years. My CW5 buddy, who was my colleague, my coworker in Kabul, we were in the CJOC there, and he just said, "Hey, like, I found this publishing company. It looks pretty cool. Like, they're based out of Colorado Springs. We were at Fort Carson in Colorado." And I don't know if he was friends with the CEO on LinkedIn or something like that, but he's like, "Hey, you were talking about writing your book. You should check it out, dude." And I was like, "Yeah, maybe I will." And long story short, a couple of years later, I ended up talking to them, and they liked the idea, and they turned out to be an awesome company. Like, as an alternative to self-publishing, if you publish yourself, you accrue all the costs, right? You accrue the costs of designing a cover, an editor, all that stuff, if you seek one out. They're just a service provider, and so they help you with their connections to editors, to online sales, and all this stuff, marketing and everything. And it's pretty awesome. It was a great process. They're wonderful to work with. And what's interesting, I think, is a lot of people have a story. Every veteran I've ever met has a story to tell. We all have war stories, whether or not they're from actual war or not. But like the stuff veterans go through is absolutely crazy. I mean, your war story could be black mold in the barracks in one of these antiquated army bases that should have been upgraded like 100 years ago, and they're really interesting stories, and most people don't write them down. They just have the story, and they tell the story over beers however many times. But what's crazy is, like, when you actually write down your story, it's amazing what you remember that you'd forgotten. And the more you remember, you're like, "Oh, that's right, I forgot about that. Oh, that's worth remembering." And then that leads to another thing and another thing and another thing, and before you know it, you have 700 pages like I did.
Nice.
But yeah, but no, it's crazy. And the process was, dude, I hated writing. I absolutely hated writing. I wrote more for that book than every single paper I've ever done for school combined in my entire life. And what's crazy is, through the process, I found out how therapeutic writing can be, how much I enjoyed it, how much of an exercise it is for the muscle, the muscle that is your brain. Like any other muscle, you need to work it. And it was a great experience for me. So I highly recommend to anybody who has any kind of story, talk to the guys at Tactical 16, talk to them about your plan, what your story's about, and just start writing. And all you have to do is just write one thing and it leads to the next thing, and you can arrange it later. The writer's block is I don't know if I believe it or not, but just write the first thing that comes to mind because it'll lead to the next thing. You can organize it later. That's what editors are for.
How can people get this book?
Please go to Tactical 16 Publishing,
Okay.
their website, and look under their authors page or their products, and you can search my name, and I will be there. And I say that because it supports a veteran-owned business, first and foremost, as a veteran-owned publishing company. You might get exposed to some other cool books worth reading, but also, just to be perfectly honest, it's how you help me out the most. You know, like I said before, Amazon takes about 60% of your profits, but Tactical 16, their store is the best way to support us in our endeavors. So I'd appreciate if people bought there.
I will have the link to your book page on Tactical 16 in the Oscar Mike Radio show post, and you know, all the social media stuff. You got to check it out. It's a really great story and different perspective on not only military aviation, leadership, and just, you know, how life works. So look, I just could sit here for the next 6 hours and talk to you just about, you know, starting up the Apache, much less flying it. I've really had a good time, you know, getting to know you and appreciate what you did here, because, you know, I think to your point is there's a lot of stories that never get told because people don't think they have value. And I certainly got a lot of value out of your book. So I want to say thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. Awesome. So the book again is Time of Flight by Spencer Emch. You can get it on Tactical 16 Publishing's website. I will have the link there. I will also, Spencer, have the links to your Expat Jack website, which is, yeah, Expat Jack, got that right.
So I made that. The funny thing about that is I made that as like to have something to give, because I moved to Romania, dude. Like I had no idea what to expect. So I was like, I need to have something that like people can check out. Maybe they want to hire me for some kind of consulting or something. But yeah.
Well, you know what I'm thinking as I'm saying that, I'm thinking Samurai Jack. No, it's not Samurai Jack, it's Expat Jack.
Yeah.
I was thinking Samurai.
Being an expat and then kind of a jack of all trades, you know, like that's where it comes from.
Oh, nice.
Actually, the real thing I'm working on is called Ride Tribe Romania, and that's kind of a little bit more. But I'll give you all that stuff, man. It's funny.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for checking out this time with Spencer Emch, Army aviator, writer, businessman, and pilot. And Spencer, thank you for your time here on Oscar Mike Radio. Please check out the book at Tactical 16 Publishing. And as we say, well, when we're firing at helicopters, Spencer, we say missile in flight, but at Oscar Mike Radio, we say mission in flight. Thank you again.
Okay. So we always talk back and forth to the JTAC. When we sign off station, we say, see ya.
No, the missile, we hit the lieutenant or captain hits the button to fire the missile. Me, the radar operator, will say missile in flight. Missiles on the way to target. So I made a play on that. All right.
Fair enough.
We'll see you guys later. Thanks again, and stay frosty. Thank you for listening and watching Oscar Mike Radio, where our active duty service members and veterans are in action and the mission is in flight. If you are a veteran or know a veteran who needs help, please dial 998 and press 1 for the Veterans Crisis Line.